thought today we'd roll out the big guns. It seems that when the going gets tough, everyone starts baking. And I did the last video, it was shortbread, it was meant to be a fairly easy one. It turned out to be hideously complicated. So I thought I might as well just start with complicated. This is one of my signature bakes, but if you come from the UK, this is everywhere. This is, very, very standard afternoon treat. When I grew up, I called them chocolate caramel squares, but I think nowadays most people regard them as millionaire shortbread. Right, very, very straightforward up to a point. The caramel's a wee bit tricky. We're going to start off with a shortbread base. Now in the last video I did, I was saying how lovely shortbread is, that it's kind of such a nice proportionate kind of recipe. But in this one I actually put in a little bit less sugar. So I have 1 1/3 cups of flour, just all-purpose flour, 1 1/3 sticks of butter, and if you want to see how that compares metric-wise, all that details are actually on my website, so I'll give you details of that later. But we just lob all of this into the mixer. I solved the mixer problem by just grabbing it over here. And then we're going to put the butter in. And we just turn on the mixer. And we're going to take, this is a quarter sheet. In the UK, I quite often used to use like a Swiss roll tin. It gives you a slightly different shape. They're slightly thinner. But this works very well. So just pour all of that, just tip it out. And then just using your fingers, press it into the tin. And we're going to bake this for about maybe 25 to 30 minutes in quite a cool oven, so around about 320 Fahrenheit, 160 centigrade. And after about 25 minutes, if you just kind of take a wee look at it, make sure it's not getting too brown. I quite like getting mine quite crispy, otherwise if you get it quite dark, then there's a nice contrast between the shortbread and the caramel centre and the chocolate, but obviously don't burn it. And then once you've done that, you just get a fork. Prick it all over. And then throw that in. Hi, so I'm back, and I've just looked at the first part of the video, and it looks like I'm sort of whispering a little bit like a church mouse. That's because the house is full of people. My husband's working next door, and I'm really nervous about disturbing him, so my apologies if it was very hard to understand. Like I said, all of this is actually on my website, perfect detail. And I also noticed that I forgot to tell you it was 1/3 of a cup of sugar that I used in the shortbread. Anyway, we're on to the next part, which is the caramel. So I'll see you in a sec. Hi, so we're back. And this time we're going to make the caramel to go in the centre. So this is not for the faint-hearted. We're going to use another 1 3/4 sticks of butter, which is 7 ounces of butter. And this can come straight from the fridge this time. So we put this in first and melt it. And then we're going to add a whole tin of condensed milk, which as a child I used to love, because then we would spend the next 5-10 minutes looking at the insides of it. And the last ingredient is something called Miles golden syrup. Now this is similar to corn syrup, but it's not. So really try and check this out. In Darien, you can get this in Palmer's or Whole Foods. I don't think Stop and Shop sell it anymore. In the UK, it's very easy to get hold of. So we're just waiting for that to melt. And while we do that, we'll open the tin of condensed milk. Still a bit cheap. Look at that. And this seems to be the only spatula that I can find. So just wait for this to melt. But to be honest, this part is a little bit boring because it can take up to about 20 minutes for the caramel to actually cook, and during that time it can also separate, so you have to kind of go fairly slowly. I sometimes phone my parents when I'm doing this, or check my emails. You know, you can kind of multitask. So I'm going to show you all the ingredients. I'm going to show you me stirring for maybe a minute or two, and then I'll come back at the end and show you what it looks like when it's finished. So we're just going to put all the rest of the ingredients in. It's a full tin of condensed milk. Oh, that lovely sugary goodness. This recipe always reminds me of that quote from Elf when he's asked about his diet. And he says that he covers all the four main food groups, which from memory is like candy cane, candy corn, and sugar or syrup. Anyway, this is a very similar sort of recipe full of yummy goodness. And we're going to do 4 tablespoons of this. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then all we have to do now is just mix. And I find it works well with the whisk. You can use a spatula as well. You're trying to get the temperature somewhere between nothing happening and it all burning and sticking to the bottom of the pan. So it just really requires keeping your eye on it. And like I say, it's a little bit of a lengthy process. So I'll let you go and I'll come back when we're all finished. Okay, so maybe that didn't take quite as long as I thought. More like, I don't know, 12, 13 minutes. As I predicted, it's separated slightly, so if that happens, you just kind of just take it off the heat and keep stirring it until it kind of comes together again. And then we're just going to pour it over the base of the shortbread. So I can speak as loud as I want now, but you can hear possibly in the background. That's my husband out in the garden blowing leaves. So there we are. So it's a kind of, it's a caramelly colour. You can do a set test on it like you would for jam. If you're not too sure if it's set or not, you can like put a wee bit on a plate, a whole plate, and see if it wrinkles. This should be fine. So we're just going to get all of that caramel out and put it just use the spatula just to even it out, and then we'll just leave that to get cool, and we'll do the last part, which is putting some chocolate over it. And we'll go and set that part up and get back to you in just a wee sec. Hi, so the final part of the chocolate caramel squares is melting the chocolate to go on top. Now, in the US, I use this excellent Belgian chocolate from Trader Joe's. My only problem with this is keeping it in the house. I buy large quantities, and yet when I go to bake, quite often I find there's nothing left. So just break it into smaller pieces. I use about half of the bar, which is just over ½ pound. Entirely up to you how much you use. But this is milk. Quite often chocolate caramel squares use dark chocolate, but I like the milk chocolate. It's entirely up to you. So we're going to melt that, and then just spread it over the caramel. So when you're melting chocolate, the water underneath should be just slightly simmering. It shouldn't be boiling because you can actually burn the chocolate. So we're just going to watch that. I found that you can temper chocolate. I have tried, it is really complicated. By all means, knock yourselves out if you fancy doing it, and that's what gives you that really glossy finish to your chocolate caramel squares. I find that just about as good a way of doing it is once you put the chocolate on, you throw it in the fridge. Now this is the tricky part. You have to kind of keep an eye on it because you want it to get to that stage where the chocolate is set enough so you can mark it, but not so set that when you put the knife through it, it'll start cracking. So I just, again, it's probably about half an hour. Depends how cold your fridge is, how hot your chocolate caramel squares are. But that's the final part. And then I sometimes bring this particular dessert or sweet. Sorry, I've lost my camera, I can't see myself. I sometimes actually don't put the chocolate on because I find sometimes the chocolate will start to have a bloom on it. So I always keep the chocolate caramel squares in the fridge. It's not that they're going to go off, nothing bad is really going to happen to them, but sometimes the chocolate can start just looking a little bit unpleasant. So if I don't think I'm going to be using the chocolate caramel squares, I quite often make a double batch, because if you're going to go through all that grief of standing and stirring caramel, you might as well make twice as much. They freeze really nicely. Or I sometimes just leave it shortbread, caramel, cover it up, throw that in the fridge, and then I put the chocolate on nearer the time that I plan to use it. So I would thoroughly suggest that you double the recipe, which would mean for the base you're looking at 3 1/3 cups, which makes me think 3 1/3 cups of flour. So I need to go back and check because I've got a horrible suspicion that I maybe give you the wrong quantities earlier on. Anyway, it's all good. So again, this is taking a little bit longer. I'm just going to turn you off for 2 secs. The chocolate has now melted. Be careful when you take it off the water because the steam can actually burn you if you're not careful. So it's also quite good to take the water off the bottom so it doesn't drip in the caramel. So take the chocolate and put it over the base like this. And then using what is my favourite thing at the moment, my offset spatula. Beautiful, I can thoroughly recommend getting one of these. Chocolate out. And I have realised just when I was talking there that I absolutely gave you the wrong quantities for the shortbread base. It actually doesn't make any difference because it's still a proportional thing. But now I think about it, it's normally 1 2/3 of a cup of flour and 1 2/3 of a stick of butter. I'm so used to doing a double quantity, which is where the 3 1/3 comes in. And I've obviously confused myself. So again, quantities for the base. Just for one single sheet like this, you're looking at 1 2/3 cups of flour, 1 2/3 sticks of butter, and then 1/3 of a cup of sugar. And if you look on my website, which is Carolyn's absolutely fabulous events, I will put up the latest post, and that will be the chocolate caramel squares, and you can get the full instructions there. Anyway, we're done. We're going to put this in the fridge, and within about 20 minutes, half an hour, have a wee cup of tea and a bit of chocolate caramel square. Have fun.